Hello, class, and welcome to another week of EPSY 255. We are in week 7, and it is just about halfway through the semester. And I'm so proud of you all for keeping up with the assignments and doing so well. And I just hope to learn more and more about what you all are learning through your writing and through your quizzes. This week, we are going to discuss chapter 9, which talks about language. And so, of course, the question is, what is language? Language is just a type of communication, and there are various forms or types of communication, including written communication, spoken, just as I'm speaking right now, and also sign language. What also makes forms of communication and language is that the words have to be used by a community. So it doesn't make sense for you to be the only person to speak a language, because the point of language is for you to communicate with other people. So that's why the words or the forms of communication have to be used by the community, because those words should be used for the community to understand each other. Not only should the words be used by a community, but the words should be highly ordered and organized. I know for a lot of people where English is their second language, we have a lot of rules, a lot of ways to organize nouns, pronouns, syntax. All of those things are included in language, and I know it can be hard for a lot of people that don't speak English as their first language to learn English, because we have just so many rules that are not in other languages. So language has to be highly ordered and organized. And so we talked about a form of communication, which is sign language. And the next slide, we're going to watch a video of the use of sign language with young children.
It promotes language development. Secondly, we see that children can usually communicate manually before they can communicate orally. An example of that might be for an infant to do more with their hands. It's easier than saying more with your lips. And so by being able to communicate wants and needs, it reduces frustration, not just for the infant, but also for the parents. The earlier, the better. The more a child sees a signed word or hears a spoken word, they learn it faster. So as soon as you want to dive into learning sign, that's the best time to start. Children will usually start communicating things they want or need. For example, milk would be one of a sign that a lot of times children will say or sign early. And this is just actually made when you think about milking a cow. That's where that comes from. Mom and dad. Get a book. Check out, one of the DVDs from the library. Start learning the vocabulary. It's nice to kind of keep a list and check it off with mom and dad. The more you use it, the easier it becomes and the more natural. One thing that I think some parents do is they're thinking so much about their signs that they're not communicating naturally the way they would with their child. And you don't want to do that. You want it to be just natural. And if it starts to get in the way of communication, if you're thinking more about what you're signing than what you're saying and the way you're interacting, you want to slow down a little bit.
Okay, so that was just a short video of baby sign language. And as the instructor said, she explained that for many times children are able to verbally or cognitively understand before they're able to verbally express. And so instead of being able to verbally express, sign language gives children an opportunity, babies and children an opportunity to communicate with their body, which they are usually able to do faster compared to actually speak. And we'll get more into that throughout this lecture. So, infancy in language. There are a few steps for developing language during infancy. So, the first type of language that infants usually use to communicate is crying. And that is the first thing that a baby does there when they are born, is that they cry. And that is them taking their first breath. Crying as the children get older also can communicate that they are hungry, that they are sleepy, that they are wet or need to be changed. So crying is a form of communication for infants. And then as children begin to grow, they begin to be able to begin to coo at around the age of 1 to 2 months. And cooing is just another way, a word for gurgling sounds. Gurgling sounds, and they usually express pleasure. So if they like the milk that they're drinking, they may coo. Or if they like being held by their parents or wrapped in a a warm blanket, then they may coo. Another type of form of communication that infants use is babbling, and this usually begins at 6 months. And that is babbling. They're not words; it's just more of consonants that they just repeat. And what's interesting about babbling is that when there are deaf infants that are born to deaf parents, the deaf infants actually use sign language instead of babbling. So babbling can not only be verbally, but it can be used through sign language too. I thought that was very interesting. And the last type of form of communication that infants use is gestures. And they begin this around the age of 8 to 12 months. A type of gesture that infants often do is pointing. And pointing is an important social aspect of language. And it usually follows a developmental sequence. If they're able to point, eventually they will be able to use their hands, like we talked about with sign language, in order to make gestures and to express how they are feeling. Recognizing language sounds. So between the ages of right after they're born and 6 months, the book describes children of this age as citizens of the world. And the reason why they are called citizens of the world is because when children are between these ages, children are able to recognize sound changes no matter what language that the adults or people around them are speaking. So they're able to have an understanding of sound changes in various types of languages. But around the age of 6 months and forward, the children begin to lose the ability to recognize different sound changes in different languages. And what they mainly focus on now is recognizing sound changes that are in the language that is spoken to them most. So it may be English, it may be Spanish, maybe Portuguese. All of it would just they would mainly be able to understand the sound change in the language that's spoken mostly to them. And then we have a baby, they have their first words. Usually children speak their first words at around 13 months. And as the teacher talked about in the video, usually children can understand words before they're actually able to produce or speak words. And children usually know their name by 5 months. They may not be able to pronounce it, but they know their name and at least are able to turn their head once their name is spoken to them. First words can be anything. They can be body parts, greeting terms, familiar animals, names of important people, dada, mama, all of those things can be different types of first words that children can use. So I said around the age of 13 months, that's the average age that children are able to speak their first words. But it's also important to understand the difference between receptive vocabulary and spoken vocabulary. At around 13 months, children are usually able to understand about 50 words. And so being able to understand those words, that is called receptive vocabulary. And spoken vocabulary, it is where the children are not able to speak those words until about 18 months. And so words that are able to be spoken fall into the spoken vocabulary category. Then we have this vocabulary spurt. Around 18 months, children are able to speak about 50 words. But when children turn 2, and 18 and 24 months, that's not a lot of time in between, they're able to speak about 200 words. So they have this huge vocabulary spurt between the ages of 18 months and 2 years of age. Obviously, if children are able to speak, that means that the language, the words that they're using have to have some type of meaning. So we're going to go over the 2 types of meanings of words. So the first type of meanings of words that children usually use would be overextension compared to underextension. So when we talk about overextension, an example of overextension is that a child sees an apple and calls that an apple. A child sees a tomato, the child calls it an apple. Anytime that a child uses one word for many objects, that would be an overextension. But when we say underextension, that's the opposite. So, for example, a child may have a dog. They understand that their dog is a dog. They may see another dog on the street, but they don't say that that is a dog. They believe that their dog is the only dog. That's the only type of dog there is. They don't understand that there are different types of dogs. So that would be underextension. So they may call another dog a cat, for example, but they would call their own dog a dog. So understand, overextension, one word for many objects, and in underextension, you use one word for just one object in particular. Telegraphic speech. Children begin to use simple 2 to 3 word sentences and at around the age of 18 to 24 months. And they understand that they understand the tone that goes along in the context for these 2-word utterances. So for example, they may use 2-word utterances for repetition, more milk, or they may use 2-word utterances for a question, where ball. And yes, children all go through these 2-word utterances, but as parents, it's important also for you to be able to use English that is more than 2 words so that they're able to eventually understand the context. Okay, I will see you all on the next video.